Have you ever felt a grief so heavy it seemed impossible to carry? And yet that very grief became the spark of a movement that shook an empire. Stay with me, because the tears that fell on the sands of Karbala did not dry in silence. They flowed into rivers of resistance, carved new identities, and within a single generation flooded the palaces of power. This is the story of what happened after Ashura, how sorrow turned into revolution, and how the echo of 72 martyrs still resounds in more than 1 billion hearts today. The last cries on the plain of Karbala had hardly faded when the first embers of revolt were struck. The Umayyad banners rose triumphant, yet deep inside Kufa a hush of shame began to spread from house to house. Men who had once promised Imam Hussein their swords now could not meet their own reflections in water jars. Women beat their chests in courtyards, asking why their husbands had stood idle while the Prophet's grandson was cut down. Grief, raw and unresolved, was the first rung of a tension ladder that would soon climb toward open defiance. But here's the twist. Grief alone rarely topples empires. It must first find a voice. And that voice came from the captives, the women of Karbala led by Zainab bint Ali and the ailing young Imam Zain al-Abidin. Chains clinked at their ankles as they entered Kufa, yet every clang struck guilt in the hearts of the townspeople. In the governor's courtyard, Zainab's speech cracked the city's silence like lightning splitting night. She named the martyrs one by one, then asked, "People of Kufa, where were your vows?" That single question stirred a storm that no sword could quiet. News galloped faster than horses. By the time the captives reached Damascus, markets from Basra to Jerusalem buzzed with stories of Hussein's last stand. The Umayyad court staged a parade of victory, heads of martyrs hoisted on spears. But the crowd did not cheer. Instead, whispers spread beneath silken awnings. A caliph who killed the Prophet's grandson could not claim God's blessing. Yazid's own courtiers bit their lips, uncertain whether they served a ruler or a curse. Now you might be wondering what happened when the captives returned to Medina. Picture the Prophet's mosque shrouded in black cloth. Sobs rolled like thunder through its columns as Zainab retold every hour of Ashura. The city's air grew thick with lament, and pilgrims carried that sorrow back to every corner of the caliphate. In barber shops of Damascus and ship decks of Aden, one name now meant both tragedy and defiance: Hussein. But grief soon demanded action. 4 years after Karbala, a group of aging companions and penitents, the Tawwabin, the repenters, gathered at the grave of Hussein. Lanterns flickered over sword-calloused hands as they swore to die, avenging the blood they had failed to protect. Their leader, Sulaiman ibn Surad al-Khuzai, raised a banner stitched with the words, "Yala Tharat al-Hussein," O vengeance for Hussein. Though vastly outnumbered, they marched against Umayyad forces near Ain al-Warda. Their defeat was swift, yet their martyrdom lit a torch of resistance that would not be snuffed. For it taught the next wave that courage, no matter how doomed, could cleanse dishonor and inspire the living. Step by step, the stakes rose. Enter Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, a strategist with sharper vision. He rallied freed slaves, tribal rivals of the Umayyads, and Persians nursing old wounds. In 685 AD, Mukhtar seized Kufa and unfurled a black banner emblazoned with the words, Al-Mahdi. He promised justice in the name of the hidden Imam, an early signal of a Shia identity taking shape. His army hunted down many who had killed Hussein: Shimr, Kauli, Harmala. Heads once lifted in pride were now sent to the families of the martyrs. Streets of Kufa rang with chants praising the people of the cloak, al-Bayt, and fear crept into Umayyad dreams. Yet Mukhtar's revolt revealed a deeper transformation. Soldiers in his ranks were not all Arabs. Many were Mawali, non-Arab Muslims seeking equality after decades of second-class status. Hussein's sacrifice, therefore, became a banner not only for the Prophet's household, but also for social justice across the empire. The idea that bloodlines alone could not sanctify oppression spread like dawn light, illuminating minds from Fars to Khorasan. Before we dive further into politics, let me explain how rituals began to weave grief into collective memory. In the years after Karbala, families gathered each Muharram in private courtyards, recounting the story with tears, beating their chests in slow rhythm. Poets like Kumayt and al-Sayyid al-Himyari composed elegies so moving that listeners fainted. These majalis, gatherings, were more than mourning. They were schools of history for the illiterate and training grounds for defiance. Each verse ended with a bridge statement. But the story is not over, keeping listeners poised for the next rung of tension. Commemoration spilled into public squares. By the mid-8th century, processions wound through Kufa, Baghdad, and Rai, mourners dressed in black, carrying replicas of Hussein's bier. Drums mimicked the hoofbeats of Karbala. Standards dripped with red dye to symbolize martyrs' blood. Pilgrims risked arrest to reach Hussein's grave, reciting Ziyarat Ashura. I stand witness that your word is true. Even some Sunni scholars, moved by the moral clarity of the stand, declared visiting Karbala an act of devotion. Thus, the memory of Ashura crossed sectarian lines and planted seeds of unity amid grief. But here's another twist. The politics of memory forced rulers to respond. The Abbasids, rising against the Umayyads in 750 AD, exploited the righteous anger over Karbala. Their black flags bore inscriptions of vengeance for al-Bayt, and many soldiers marched believing an Abbasid Caliph would honor Hussein's legacy. Yet once enthroned, the new dynasty grew wary of the very passion that had lifted it. Some Abbasid Caliphs banned processions. Others built walls around Hussein's grave. Each prohibition only deepened loyalty among mourners, proving that suppressing memory can sharpen it like a whetstone. Engaging question. Have you ever noticed how the more you forbid a story, the louder it grows? The aftermath of Karbala illustrates that paradox perfectly. With every ban, poets grew bolder, weaving metaphors so veiled yet clear that censors could not delete them. Shopkeepers painted tulips, symbols of martyrdom, on clay jars. Mothers named sons Hussein, so that every classroom echoed the beloved martyr's name. Meanwhile, intellectual shifts redefined community. Scholars in Kufa and Qom collected sayings attributed to the Imams, circulating hadith that emphasized justice, patience, and resistance to tyranny. Gradually, allegiance to the line of Ali crystallized into a distinct Shia identity. Doctrines like imamate, leadership of the infallible descendants, answered a burning need. Who can guide conscience when rulers shed innocent blood? The martyrdom of Hussein became proof that truth may stand outside palaces, but politics did not fold its arms. Zayd ibn Ali, a brilliant grandson of Hussein, rose in 740 AD, uniting both Shia and sympathetic Sunni tribes with a simple thesis. The Quran commands standing against injustice. His revolt failed, yet the movement he forged later inspired the Zaydi state in Yemen, where imams would rule for 1,000 years, invoking Karbala as their charter. Across the empire, every spark of rebellion echoed Ashura. In North Africa, Idris ibn Abdullah, another descendant, fled Abbasid pursuit and founded a new dynasty in Morocco, teaching Berber tribes the tale of Karbala as a model of resistance. In Central Asia, the Samanids patronized poets who compared local uprisings against corrupt governors to Hussein's defiance. The ripple effect reached even Christian chroniclers of Syria, who recorded how Muslims wept for a martyr whose cause they likened to biblical prophets. Now you might be feeling the rising stakes. Grief grows into ritual, ritual into identity, identity into revolutions that redraw maps. But the latter ascends higher. During the Umayyad era in the 10th century, Shia viziers in Baghdad launched the first state-sponsored Ashura processions. Streets were draped in black, markets closed, sermons thundered from pulpits once silent. Sunni historians witnessing the spectacle wrote of drums that shook the earth like Judgment Day. Politically, these ceremonies signaled that power could no longer ignore the moral capital of Karbala. Let's travel further east. In Shiraz, artisans carved scenes of Ashura onto mosque doors, while in Delhi, Sufi saints preached that the tears shed for Hussein washed the rust from hearts. Rulers learned they could borrow the symbolism too. The Safavid Shahs of Persia made mourning an official art form. Tazia passion plays, turning town squares into open-air theaters where actors replayed the tragedy nightly each Muharram. The audience did not sit. They joined the lament, blurring line between spectator and participant. Emotional transportation reached its zenith. Sword clanks, babies' cries, tents set aflame in controlled fires. All senses overwhelmed until grief felt immediate and personal. But here is the final twist in our tension ladder. Karbala's message did not merely topple kings. It challenged ordinary people to confront tyranny in their own time. In 1979, banners quoting Hussein fluttered through Tehran as protesters shouted, "Every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala." In 2011, demonstrators in Bahrain held placards reading, "We are the sons of Zainab." From the Philippines' Moro struggle to Nigeria's marches for justice, echoes of that 7th century desert still reverberate. Before we step down the ladder, remember a smell: damp soil around Hussein's tomb after the spring rains. Pilgrims scoop it into tiny pouches, believing the earth of Karbala absorbs sorrow and radiates courage. That clay, called turba, sits on millions of prayer mats worldwide, an everyday reminder that bowing to God means never bowing to oppression. Now let's weave our strands into a single theme. The aftermath of Karbala shows that grief, when voiced with truth, is the seed of revolution. Commemoration forged solidarity. Solidarity shaped identity. Identity inspired uprisings that kept the torch of justice lit through centuries of shifting thrones. Hussein's last stand taught the world that morals outweigh mortality, and every tyrant henceforth must fear the whisper of his name. Have you ever felt small in the face of vast injustice? Remember the widows of Karbala who stood before a caliph and shattered his arrogance with words alone. Their grief did not seek revenge for its own sake. It sought to restore the dignity of humanity. That same energy waits in every heart, asking only a spark of courage to ignite. And that brings us to our conclusion. From grief to revolution, the ripple of Karbala crossed deserts, rivers, and centuries, teaching each generation a simple lesson. Stand for justice, speak for the voiceless, and let conscience, not fear, shape your destiny. The drums of Ashura still beat, not to mourn the dead alone, but to summon the living to a higher path. The story ends on the same plane where it began. Karbala. Pilgrims approach by the millions, waving flags that read, "Hussein unites us." Under the golden dome, they whisper vows to resist tyranny in all its forms. And as they leave, they carry a spark of that ancient revolution back to their streets, their offices, their homes. In that way, the aftermath of Karbala is never past. It is always unfolding wherever hearts refuse to surrender to injustice. So the next time you hear a drum in Muharram or see a procession winding through your city, pause and listen. Beneath the chants and tears is a promise first spoken on a lonely battlefield. That truth, once awakened, can change the course of history, and that every whisper of justice, no matter how small, carries the power of Karbala.